Any opposed? Wouldn't have thought so. Cool. Kia ora. So back down to item 11. Apologies, especially to our mana whenua partners at the back who've been waiting patiently for this really important item. So we have Michelle, Kim and Nick are here to present on the Waitakere Ranges Heritage Area Deed of Acknowledgement with Te Kawerau Āmaki and the Agreement in Principle on key elements.
Tēnā tātou katoa, ko Michelle Chen tōku ingoa. I am a Principal Advisor in Ngā Mātarai Māori Outcomes. I'm here today with my Director Nick Turoa and Kim Bellingham, our Legal Counsel. We're here today for two purposes. Firstly, to seek your agreement in principle on the key elements of a deed of acknowledgement with Te Kawerau Āmaki. And secondly, to seek your approval to take those key elements out for public engagement starting February next year to inform final decisions on the deed. I'll take the report as read because it has the ideas in the report have been workshops with this committee last month. But we'll talk a little bit about the four key elements that we are seeking your agreement in principle for, which is at recommendation A. So we are proposing that this deed will involve these four key elements. Firstly, an overarching strategic plan for the heritage area, which would fill a current gap in our planning and strategic instruments. It will relate specifically to the heritage area and guide decision-making on public lands. It will help translate the high-level objectives in the 2008 Waitakere Ranges Heritage Area Act into what it means for our mahi on the ground in the heritage area. Secondly, so the strategic plan will set out some agreed outcomes, what the parties want to see achieved in the heritage area, and then we're proposing that the parties would agree work programs to achieve those outcomes. The work programs can bring together our existing regional and local work programs, but it's also an opportunity to add in Te Kawerau Āmaki priorities to work together on. Thirdly, we're proposing that the parties would come together to jointly monitor the achievement of the outcomes set out in that strategic plan. And for number 4, we propose 2 options for a vehicle to implement those first 3 options. And the option that we're recommending is option 1, which is to establish a joint committee of council with Te Kawerau Āmaki and the Crown to undertake those elements. Last week, when the faux local board agreed to all these recommendations, including the joint committee option. They also added an extra resolution in recognition that Te Kawerau Āmaki originally wanted this body to be a statutory entity. Last week, the Waitakere Ranges Local Board also agreed to these resolutions, and as you heard from Chair Presland earlier today, he's very much an advocate for the joint committee option and for bringing the community along and leveraging the good work that they have been doing in the community. And that might be it from me. I'll open the floor to any questions. Thank you.
Kia ora. Thank you so much, Michelle. I know there's been a huge amount of work done on this and long before this as well, so thank you. Councillor Henderson would like to move. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Walker? Right. Questions? Councillor Turner.
Thank you very much. And some of the stuff we've had several meetings, so I'll be reiterating some of it, but we're in public now. So, look. So the first thing in option 1, it says here supported by the community. We've got, you've said we're going to establish a joint committee with Te Kawerau and with the Crown and ourselves, and then it says supported by the community. And I've been passing on for some time that, I've learned a lot being on the Maunga Authority, and I've also heard comments from Te Kawerau, from Ed, about what you were saying, a formal structure. And what I like about that is that the community gets to hold the apple too. And I'm concerned with everything I've seen so far where we use these loose words for the community, which is large in the Waitakeres, in respect of it being largely a park area. How are we going to ensure that they hold the apple too and feel equal. You know, two wrongs don't make a right. So I don't want to have the locals, many of them who have worked very hard over the last few decades, as the kaitiaki, as the stewards, feeling that they are not equal in this partnership. And I suppose partnership is the word, and so we don't use that, you know, this support. What does that actually look like in something that you think of putting together?
Thank you, Councillor, for that question. Of course, the exact role of the community can be, will be shaped by our public engagement that we are proposing to do with them next year. But some ideas from staff at this point: the community can raise issues for the joint committee to consider. They can provide feedback or support the delivery of activities, you know, leveraging the work that they've already been doing, as you said, in the community for so many decades. And of course, their interests, you know, when you talk about both holding the apple together, their interests will continue to be represented on the joint committee table by the elected members, appointed representatives of the local boards in the governing body who are elected to represent the community's interests.
Thank you. What I've heard across the board, though, is people are annoyed that it's not working, whether it's council, whatever it is, it's not working in the Waitakeries. You know, I asked questions just before about the spend of the neta. And so there's quite a lot of internet-connected things in what we're doing here. We've got a deed of acknowledgement. I understand that, you know, to carry out the right and for us to acknowledge that they know the history. But then we've got the fact that that's also in this thing, what does it say here? The only purpose of a deed of acknowledgement is to identify opportunities for collaboration by tangata whenua, blah, blah, blah. I understand that's what we're trying to do. And I am also pleased, thank you, that we've added the words in red to explain that this is only over council and Crown land. But I also accept the arguments I'm hearing about the fact that the heritage area, you know, it's 17,000 acres of council and Crown land. It's about 10,500 hectares, of private land. I also accept that there's a blurred interchange there, and that pests and problems don't respect those drawn boundaries. So again, I'm just trying to make sure that the people who are in that 10,500 hectares, the other people of Auckland, feel involved and properly connected to this, and that we're not just, and that we're taking what is this replacing? Because the last thing I think anybody wants is yet another layer of bureaucracy going down and down. I support this as long as it can deliver. So what's your answer to that, Nick?
Thank you, Councillor, and I don't think there's anyone suggesting that this is anything about two wrongs making a right. I think what people are suggesting is around a collaborative way of meeting the purpose of the Act with regards to promoting, advocating for its regional, national significance of that space. I think we've heard in the last item just how important community involvement and engagement is in delivering on environmental outcomes. And I think that that same ideology will continue to apply to every single way in which we look after the natural environment. People and the environment go hand in hand, and we need to bring people on the journey. And I accept and agree with you on that point, that that is something that should happen. We are putting together the idea of bringing in a joint committee which brings in the decision makers into one space alongside mana whenua, so that those decisions can be made and that those views of those people living directly in there and that have those connections to that space are there to make those decisions. We want to agree on those general principles of what the ways in which Te Kawarawamaki will be involved, and then we want to take that out to the public so that we can talk to the public about that and ensure that their ideas are put into what we bring back to this idea. You have talked about the idea of creating another level of bureaucracy. May I just say that it's been our experience with connecting with 3 local boards, this committee and the Crown to try and get anything that looks remotely united is somewhat a feat of bureaucratic juggling. But we've been managed to bring that into it, bring that together and to bring that forward for a decision. I think there is an opportunity for us to simplify through bringing decision makers together so that there is one space that people can look at for decisions with regards to the delivery of work in the Waitakere heritage area. I think that that has the potential to make things simpler. Having said that, it will rely on the leadership of yourselves, as well as those that sit on the board, and the already proven leadership that Te Kawerau Maki has had in advocating for this going forward.
Chair, if I just one last question. Or maybe, so thank you, and I accept that. All the stuff we read through and all the things we've been given and some of the stuff that Te Kawerau's put online, make it very clear where their position is and what will take place here. May I request or suggest we try to make sure that the public's position on this is just as clear when we go to public consultation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Henderson.
Yeah, just a quick one. Look, you've previously advised in workshops that this process will result in more community and public involvement in the governance of the ranges, not less. Could I just ask you to kind of confirm that advice and if you've got anything to add to that?
Yes, yes to confirming it. Do I have anything to add?
Well, I guess what I would say is that we are going through a public process to help us shape what this looks like. And in that engagement, we'll be able to come up with what those tools and what those processes would look like. What I would remind Council is that it doesn't stop things, those current processes for engagement to continue on. For example, the engagement that we have with how we deliver our management of reserves and smaller parks, how we deliver for regional parks. We're not suggesting any changes to that. In fact, what we're suggesting is a board that comes and oversees all of that delivery and that provides an opportunity for people to engage directly with those people. So in that sense, that's another opportunity for people to engage.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Councillor. Member Ashby.
Kia ora koutou. Firstly, I just want to acknowledge Ngā Urio Te Kawerau Āmaki who are in the room today. Ngā mihi. My question, and thank you for the report, my question, it's a two-parter. But the first is, are there any other examples of place-based joint committees or partnership arrangements?
Thank you, Member Ashby. One example of a joint committee to which this council is a party is the Kaipara Moana Remediation Joint Committee. That is a partnership with the uri of Ngāti Whātua Kaipara and also the Northland Regional Council. And they presented the annual report to the Planning, Environment and Parks Committee in July this year, and it was a good news story. Yeah, that is one example that is working well, and it's supported by a partnership between the Crown, Tangata Whenua and Council, and it shows the good results that can be achieved by working together.
Thank you. And the second part is what's been proposed vastly different to that example or other examples of partnership and co-management in terms of is this a never done before kind of unheard of out the gate kind of thing?
So I guess there will be technical differences between that and the different context in which that particular joint committee was formed. What I would say is that this is nothing new with regards to how the Local Government Act works. Joint committees are a standard way of operating. There are other examples where mana whenua are on those, and certainly within council who is a party to 3 legislated co-governance arrangements, as well as 6 other different variations of a committee with mana whenua sitting alongside those. We have plenty of experiences in how we deliver those, and we have plenty of expertise internally to help support those.
Kia ora, thank you. And Chair, I just, while I will abstain from voting because of my interest, I will reserve my right to speak should it get to debate, but if that doesn't happen, again, just acknowledging our mana whenua in the room who've turned up today to hear a positive result from this council. Kia ora.
Kia ora, Member Ashby, and just quickly acknowledge you for bringing this issue to me straight at the beginning of this term, and me sort of going, why has it been 14 years, 15 years, and we haven't done it? So thanks for helping us crack this along very quickly. At this point, obviously not quick prior. Kia ora. Councillor Walker.
Sure. Just got a question as it goes to how these various things are set up, and the concern that I'd raise is the absolute need for nimbleness, speed and economy when it comes to dealing with pest incursions, irrespective of whether they're animal or plant. And the reason I'm raising that is what we see on the ground is a circumstance where we've got ongoing delays, where you've got more parties and bureaucracies and the like involved. So the reality is that things are getting out of hand, because by the time we get on top of something, the horse is bolted, literally. So my question goes to how we can ensure through this process that we do take into account nimbleness, speed, economy, and sometimes that involves the application of citizen science to get on top of things. So is that something you can address now?
Thank you, Councillor. Probably two ways. The first way is to make things go faster and more efficiently on the ground is by removing some of the current governance barriers. With multiple landowners, 3 local boards, one committee, 1 Crown, Water Care, Auckland Transport, rather than having to go through all those different decision makers, we have one table, one integrated place where they can come together to hopefully get those governance decisions done faster so people on the ground can get to their work a lot faster. And the second point I probably want to make is on the third key element that we're proposing, A3, the monitoring of the strategic plan outcomes. What we've heard that is important for this committee, if it is a joint committee, to have teeth, to be able to hold council and the Crown to account for the work that they're doing to achieve the outcomes. So that is one of the ways that we are improving things on the ground, or proposing to improve things on the ground through this arrangement.
So the upshot of it is you think things will be faster, more economical?
Yes.
Okay.
Kia ora, Councillor. Councillor Newman.
Good afternoon. I wasn't going to ask questions, but I will now, because it's been very interesting as the questions have been answered. It provokes more. I was a member of the Kaipara Moana Joint Committee, which I thought, my experience of that is that one of the challenges with it is that always with these things, it's going to generate a response that's going to require significantly more resourcing, and that there are always debates that are had in relation to the mandate of those people who are part of it. So my first question is, I assume that the community's involvement will be through the elected member politicians who are appointed. Is that right? And that the public, having got their sort of delegate representatives there, can go along and to speak at public forums and who that may be called. Is that right?
So just acknowledgement that you are correct, that when you form any sort of joint committee, there is a level of administration that has to come with that. what we are suggesting is that there's no actual change to our operational programs. We're not suggesting any new funding coming into this, but rather we look at how we're currently delivering things. And if you think there's programs of work being delivered in regional parks, local parks, Neta Fund, it's about bringing those together and looking at how they can be delivered, and then have an opportunity to, I guess, get in front of this joint committee to discuss. There's also, of course, the Crown involvement. And while the Crown have been really clear, i.e. the Department of Conservation, which would be the partner to this, that they aren't in a position to be financing things, they've talked about bringing in their own, the human resources that they provide, which shouldn't be underestimated in terms of the expertise and some of the things they bring in that regard. But also the experiences that we've had for these is that when there is funding available, an example of that would have been the Jobs for Nature Fund, that these types of arrangements have been seen in a positive light. So both the Waitakere Heritage Area through the Cody Dieback program did receive extra funding from that. And another example is the Tupuna Maunga Authority that received $3 million of funding through that Jobs for Nature program. So there is extra opportunities in that regard. So with regards to the makeup of the board, yes, we're suggesting that that would be made up of those particular elected members that would have sat on local boards and potentially from the governing body as well. So it could be a mixture. That particular makeup of that board would be something that that we would take back for consideration after engagement. But I'd also point out there that you don't necessarily have to appoint people that are directly elected members, and there are other ways in which that might be able to be done through various means. With regards to your other question, is there other ways? Would it be through forums and things like that? Again, that detail would need to be done through the next phase of this after we've received public feedback on what we're looking at setting up. So we would come back to this organisation, this council, and just to discuss that in more depth when we have those answers through that through that consultation.
Okay, and my one other question, maybe you can't answer because it's too soon in the process, but in relation to Kaipara Moana, there was a very, very significant contribution from Crown for funding that. And the only thing that I see here cited is well, there's the opportunity around, for example, Jobs for Nature. That is just, that's not even the same scale. So what I'm concerned about here is that I see the only funding pathways that, apart from being the sunk cost of officers, is a bid to an annual budget process, which is very fraught, and local board funding, which is equally fraught. So is that a risk that you would agree with? There's a potential for this thing to be set up with a great idea and a great mandate, but when it comes to the actual funding implementation, you don't have the budget for it, and you are unlikely to get the budget for it anytime soon without agreement from government, and without us being in a significantly better financial situation to address what may derive out of this as we identify the needs of those areas.
I may not be able to answer your question in its entirety, but what I would say is the deed of acknowledgement is not an option for council. The legislation says that we must deliver on a deed. Yes, there will be financial implications. Yes, we recognise that that there is, that money is required to deliver this. We're not coming here saying that we are looking at this stage at new money, rather that if we look across the range of services that have been delivered under the environmental space inside the Waitakere Heritage Areas, this is an opportunity to consolidate that and have a board look over it. So, and I do acknowledge, and going back to the point that I made with Member Ashby, the context around the kaipara moana is different. And yes, there was a significant cash contribution at that particular stage, and that is not available to us at the moment. That's certainly part of the context. But what is also part of the context is that this is something that we must do rather than we have to, and acknowledging that that a joint committee is not necessarily the only option of doing it, but it is one option of doing it.
Thank you. Councillor Leone.
Thank you, Chair. Kia ora to our mana whenua, Te Kawerau Maki Ngā mihi nui, kia koutou for coming in today, and I acknowledge the 14 years that it's taken to get to this point. The kōrero that I have as a sitting member of the kaipara moana remediation and the positive feedback that I've obviously heard around working with landowners to get them on board and make those changes. I hear what councillors are saying about the fact that we may not have the same amount of money that's in place with the kaipara moana remediation program, but I'm also looking at the success stories that have come out of that to work with private landowners, and the fact that that has been a more positive way of working alongside with them. So I just wanted to see whether you have any feedback specifically around that, because I know that that's a point that's been raised.
Those of you that are old enough to remember that there was a predecessor to the joint kaipara moana joint committee, that was the Integrated Kaipara Harbour Management Group, which was a didn't have any statutory makeup. It wasn't a joint committee. It was an informal gathering of all different councils around there, the Kaipara District, Whangarei District, Auckland Council, and the Department of Conservation and others. And that was what Te Urioho brought together in an informal arrangement. So they were able to produce the gaps analysis that laid context and sort of encouraged the Crown into the funding. They also were able to begin that relationship building, and that's not too dissimilar to what we have here at this stage. So that was all of the build up into that. So I guess what I would suggest to you is that the Kaipara Moana Joint Committee didn't come from nowhere. There was some treaty settlements prior to that, but there was some hard work that was done there on the smell of an oily rag, and that was done by a group. So there are some similarities and some things here that we can look to in terms of a pathway.
Ka pai, and just following on from the point that was made about community being involved, I know again with kaipara moana, there is usually that opportunity for community and private landowners who have successfully been part of that program to present and then obviously run events and so on to try and champion the mahi that's been done. So I think you've already raised that, but if there's anything else that you wanted to add to that, really happy to hear.
Kia ora, thank you, Councillor. Last question from Councillor Turner.
Thank you. Just a quick one. When you talk about delivery, I think there is budget. I think there's a budget there now that isn't delivering. That's what everyone's complaining about. So my question is, and I would also observe that I think the locals out there will accept anybody, whether it's a human or an organisation, that can deliver gratefully. But how do we get rid of the things it's replacing? For instance, the heritage area review every 5 years, which is already funded, etc. Can that be passed on to this organisation? Does the legislation allow that?
Thank you, Councillor. I think that the heritage area, the 5-yearly monitoring review is required as part of the law. So without changing the law, we can't get rid of that. But that is, doing that heritage review is one thing that this joint committee could pick up. It could ensure a more coordinated response and make the job of doing it easier. You know, this is a place where people come together and talk about heritage area matters already on a regular basis, not just once every 5 years.
I was just trying to ensure it wasn't going to be done twice.
No.
Thank you.
Kia ora. I'll get you to step back from the table. Thank you very much for all the work, and I know there's a lot of work to go as well. Thank you. Right, we'll go straight to Councillor Henderson. Would like to speak first.
Yeah, thanks, it's a privilege. Yeah, look, just acknowledging Te Kawerau Maki, everyone coming in here, it's so good to see you all. Acknowledging as well the capacity growth that you've had recently, it's really great. And also acknowledging just more fundamentally that as tangata whenua, you've stepped up over and over again when our communities needed it in the West, so just acknowledging that one too. Look, and a bit of an apology as well. When I was local board chair, this deed of acknowledgement work came across my desk, and with great fanfare, we're very delighted and excited, and we passed a motion to support starting it. Now, I haven't been a local board chair for a very long time, so I just wanted to acknowledge that this has been far too long in the making, and I want to apologise for that. You know, the fact is, it's not working in the Waitakere Ranges in terms of a lot of things, in terms of conservation and all those kind of stuff, despite our best efforts. At the council side, it falls between local boards and council and ward councillors. Local boards have the information and they've got great relationships and do a lot of hard work, but they don't have the power because it's a regional park. So regional parks come to us, but we don't get the detail on managing the land. We don't get all the information because it's seen as a Westie thing, which I understand as well. So what happens is the community get very angry about, you know, a perceived letdown in their levels of service. And we've talked about budgets and stuff, that certainly needs some help there as well. And so people are crying out to try something new, to try something different. And we jealously look at places like the Kaipara Moana work that's fantastically done up there up north, and acknowledging Councillor Sayers and your group for that as well. You know, it's a good example where actually partnering with mana whenua has increased outcomes and, you know, as I keep stressing, increased community engagement as well. So residents have more of an ownership of their own area and can help out. It just works for everybody, and acknowledging that within that breach, tangata whenua have had to work a hell of a lot harder with limited resources to do that kind of kaitiaki work. I hope that this is a good start to the conversation, actually, that we can eventually all work together and produce some great outcomes there. So it's a real honour to support this, and it's been a long time coming. Kia ora.
Kia ora. Thank you, Councillor. There, Councillor Turner.
Thank you. I would argue that it is working in the Waitakere Ranges, particularly in that 10,500 hectares of privately owned land, where we've got most of our under-delivery is in the parks area, and that's why I support another attempt and another try with a joint agreement in how we can make that progress better. So, you know, I too think that it's a good idea to try this, but we've got to be able to fund it in some way that is constructive. We can't set it up to fail in the very first place. Thank you.
Kia ora, Councillor. There are no other speakers. Just once again want to acknowledge all the work done on this. And it's not only 16 years you've been waiting, it's been hundreds of years, but this is a step forward. And I'm glad that this committee could pick up the work. Thank you, Member Ashby, for the focus right at the beginning so we could get something done this term. So kia ora to everyone involved. All those in favour? Any opposed? Any abstentions? I'll just say that's carried unanimously. Thank you. Kia ora.
Kei raro kona weita, kere weiti weita, tai atu ana ki ngā tai ara ka taura, karanga meira, tai nui wa tātu I te manuka nuka, o turoa I te wei, te matao, ka humata mō mui, te noho anga o te kaua ue, ko te kaua rawa maki te iwi e, hui!
Kia ora, and thank you again for waiata. Thanks. Thank you. Right, we will move to